Men speak with confidence about women, yet they scarcely comprehend themselves. This contradiction is not just ironic, it is tragic. Plato never wrote those exact words, but if you examine his philosophy with the kind of relentless honesty he demanded, you will find that this very principle pulses beneath every dialogue he ever penned. He wasn't interested in giving men advice on courtship. He wasn't a teacher of charm or tactics. What Plato offered was something infinitely more profound, a ruthless analysis of the mind's vulnerability to deception. Before men ever pursued beauty or fell under the spell of the feminine voice, Plato had already charted the treacherous terrain of the untrained soul. He saw the chaos that emerges when reason is dethroned by appetite, when man becomes a stranger to himself. It is in that chaos, in that spiritual disarray, that illusion finds its perfect breeding ground. Plato's allegory of the cave is more than a tale about political control or social conformity. It is a mirror held up to the soul chained in the darkness. Prisoners stare at flickering shadows and mistake them for truth. They build their values, their identities, and their loyalties on phantoms. The tragedy is not only that they are deceived, but that they love their deception. They cling to it. They fight for it. And one of the most enduring shadows cast upon the soul of man is woman. Not woman as she truly is in all her mystery and depth, but woman as an archetype, a fantasy, a projection, a story told to man by his own unexamined desires. This is not an accusation. It is a diagnosis. It is not hatred. It is recognition for what is more intoxicating than the idea that the feminine is always nurturing, always pure, always sincere. What myth has been more celebrated in poetry, music, and cinema? What illusion has seduced more hearts broken, more empires, and whispered more sweet lies to the unsuspecting soul? The untrained man doesn't fall in love with a woman. He falls in love with the idea of her. He falls for a smile and calls it truth. He hears her weep and assumes authenticity. She looks into his eyes, and he sees destiny. But what would Plato say? He would say this man is still chained in the cave. Wisdom begins when you accept that you know nothing. Plato insisted that before one can see truth, one must define their terms clearly, rigorously, without sentimentality. But tell me how many men have ever defined woman beyond what their emotional hunger tells them? How many men study the nature of feminine power with the same intellectual fervor they apply to politics or war? Almost none. And that is why men fall, not because women are manipulative, but because men are asleep. They are emotionally illiterate, spiritually naive, and philosophically unprepared. The woman does not need to ensnare you. She is not plotting your downfall in a hidden chamber. No, she is simply present, and her presence reflects back every weakness you have never confronted in yourself. She becomes the unintentional revealer of your lack of discipline, your hunger for approval, your fear of being unseen. Plato's harshest lesson was this: the gravest form of deception is self-deception, and in love, men lie to themselves more than they lie to others. They declare their feelings noble, their intentions pure, their love eternal. But what they are really doing is projecting a shadow while pretending it's light. The tragedy is not that women deceive men. The tragedy is that men hand women scripts to follow, and then are shocked when they perform them in the Phaedrus. Plato describes the soul, all as a chariot driven by two horses, one noble, one wild. The noble horse represents reason, honor, and restraint. The wild horse represents lust, emotion, and impulse. The driver, the man, must hold the reins tight and guide the chariot toward truth. But what happens when a woman walks into the room? The wild horse surges. It smells her scent, hears her laughter, feels the allure of her gaze, and it pulls violently toward pleasure. Most men, lacking discipline, lacking introspection, simply release the reins. They call this love. They call it fate. Plato calls it slavery. In the Symposium, love is not presented as mutual bliss. It is portrayed as a form of divine madness. Beautiful, yes, but blinding. It lifts a man up, but only to reveal how far he can fall. This madness turns the image of beauty into a god and forgets the essence behind it. And unless the man awakens, unless he masters this chaos within, he will worship shadows all his life. Women understand this, whether intuitively or through experience. They recognize the hypnotic effect they can have on a man who lacks inner stability. They don't need to manipulate. They don't need to scheme. All they need to do is stand in the light of his attention, and the rest takes care of itself. The tragedy is not that she tricks you. The tragedy is that you offered yourself up to be tricked, not because you're weak by nature, but because you never bothered to govern the parts of yourself that seek pleasure over truth. You crowned her the queen of your world, and now you suffer because she acts like it. You handed her the throne of your self-worth, and now wonder why she rules over your emotions. But it wasn't her who dethroned you. It was you who walked away from your own sovereignty. Let us be clear. The feminine does not destroy the masculine. The undisciplined masculine destroys itself and the woman. She merely reveals what was always there. She is the flame that exposes whether you are iron or wax. She is the mirror that reflects the architecture of your inner temple, not as you pretend it to be, but as it truly stands. Plato warned that when a man loses mastery over his appetites, he becomes vulnerable, not just to personal ruin, but to civilizational collapse. The fall of a city begins with the fall of discipline in its men. Look around you. The evidence is everywhere. Men today are not falling in battlefields. They are falling in bedrooms, in text messages, in moments of emotional compromise. They are not dying by swords. They are dying by silence, rejection, or indifference, because they've linked their worth to the approval of someone outside of themselves. You may think you've escaped the cave because you've read books, built businesses, or acquired influence. But none of that matters if you're still governed by the hunger to be loved. You've simply built a new cave, this time with velvet cushions and golden chains. When was the last time you asked yourself why you pursue her? What void are you trying to fill? What story are you trying to make true? Is she leading you toward truth, or is she a beautiful detour from facing the truth within yourself? These questions hurt, but that pain is sacred, because until you look at your desires without flinching, you will remain enslaved not to women, but to the illusions you've built around them. You will mistake emotional dependency for romance. You will mistake manipulation for passion. You will call your chains destiny. Plato knew that society runs not on truth, but on myth, and no myth is more persistent than the idea that a woman will save you, complete you, make you whole, but no soul can complete another. Completion is an inner event, not a romantic prize. Plato's psychology divided the soul into three parts: logos, reason thumos, spirit or will, and epithumia, appetite or desire. When reason rules, the man is aligned. When appetite rules, he collapses, and appetite is exactly where most men live when it comes to women. She speaks sweetly, and he feels affirmed. She touches him, and he feels divine. But this is not love. This is addiction. The tragedy is not that women exploit this. The tragedy is that men don't even see it happening, because the woman does not need to defeat your logic. She only needs to bypass it. She only needs to smile at the little boy inside you who still aches to be seen. And suddenly, the philosopher becomes a child again. She is not the villain. She is the test. And the test is not about her at all. It is about you. About whether you are ruled by your instincts or your ideals. whether your mission bends when met with temptation, whether you live by truth or by comfort. Imagine a man crawling through a desert. His lips cracked his mind, delirious, searching for a drop of water. Now imagine that water is her validation, a text, a glance, a kiss. He stumbles, he bleeds, he begs, not because she promised him salvation, but because he never learned to quench his thirst from within. And here's the truth most men are terrified to hear. You were not broken by her rejection. You were broken long before she arrived. She only revealed it. Plato observed that a city dies when its men become addicted to pleasure. He wrote that when the pursuit of truth is replaced by the pursuit of indulgence, all structure collapses. And that's not just political commentary, it's personal prophecy. Today, men are governed not by vision, but by desire, not by logos, but by longing. They chase women, not as companions on a noble journey, but as trophies in the theater of their own inadequacy. They seek not love, but relief from loneliness, from emptiness, from the unbearable burden of facing themselves. And so they fall over and over, not because women are powerful, but because men are undisciplined. Plato once said, "It is better to suffer injustice than to commit it." Why? Because the man who suffers remains intact, but the man who betrays his principles betrays his very soul. Now consider what happens when you chase her, when you beg, when you lie to yourself, when you sacrifice your mission just to keep her affection. You are not serving love. You are committing injustice against yourself. You violate your reason. You silence your truth. You desecrate your integrity. And you tell yourself this is noble, that this is what real men do. But Plato would disagree. The highest form of order is the man who rules himself. Society will always reward the man who plays the game, who flatters, who submits, who dances for attention. But Plato calls such men slaves in disguise. They may wear suits, they may earn applause, but they are not free. Freedom begins the moment you refuse to betray your soul for the smile of someone else. Plato envisioned the ideal ruler, not as a warrior, not as a charmer, but as a philosopher king, a man who has disciplined his appetites, refined his spirit, and submitted himself to the pursuit of truth. Above all, you don't need a throne to become this man. You don't need power over others. What you need is power over yourself. When you look at a woman, can you see her clearly? Not as a fantasy, not as a goddess, not as a savior, but as a mirror, reflecting your level of discipline, your internal clarity, your spiritual condition. That is the test, not whether you can win her, but whether you can remain yourself in her presence, whether her affection lifts you or defines you, whether you love her as a free man or need her as a prisoner. Plato's lesson is not about withdrawal from the feminine. It is about seeing through the illusion and choosing with open eyes. It is about recognizing where your power ends and your projection begins. You cannot conquer the world if you are still conquered by your hunger. Plato warned that when men abandon discipline, entire civilizations unravel. The decline of Athens did not begin on the battlefield. It began in the hearts of men who could no longer govern themselves. Leaders compromised values to appease the crowds. Truth bowed to pleasure. Reason was traded for rhetoric. Sound familiar today? Men fall not to armies, but to distractions. They crumble not from hardship, but from emotional indulgence. The battlefield is internal. Now the enemy is not out there. The enemy is within, in the craving to be validated, admired, wanted, and women, knowingly or not, serve as the clearest mirror of that weakness. She doesn't have to manipulate. She simply exists in your psyche as the key to your self-worth. You make her approval your compass. You turn her attention into your mission, and with each step away from your principles, your soul becomes smaller. This is not a war against women. This is a war against illusion, and the battleground is your own mind. You must understand something Plato implied, but never made explicit. Women test men, not out of cruelty, but out of nature. She withholds, not to destroy you, but to reveal your center. She contradicts you, not to dominate you, but to see whether your convictions have roots or are merely decoration every time you bend, fold, apologize for existing. You teach her something. You teach her that you cannot hold the line, that you will abandon truth for comfort, that your values are negotiable. And in that moment, respect dies. Not because she's heartless, but because respect cannot survive where self-betrayal thrives. Women don't ruin men. They awaken them or expose them. What she triggers in you is already there. Her power is not in what she says or does. Her power is in what you surrender in her presence. And until you learn to stand tall with your soul intact, she will keep reflecting that brokenness back to you. Plato ends his allegory of the cave with a difficult truth. The man who escapes the shadows and sees the light does not return to applause. He returns to rejection. The others, still chained, mock him. They fear him. They cling to the comfort of illusion. But he is free, and that is your challenge. Stop chasing shadows. Stop calling chains freedom. Stop giving your power away in the name of love. Begin instead the long, painful, noble work of ruling yourself. Look into her eyes, not to be saved, not to be chosen, but to see. See yourself, see your craving, see your projection. And once you do forgive yourself, then stand. Stand like the philosopher King Plato, envisioned not bitter, not resentful, not withdrawn, but killed. Clear, centered whole, because the man who rules himself cannot be manipulated. He cannot be broken by rejection or controlled by charm. He loves, but he does not need. He connects, but he does not collapse. And when you become that man, when you rise fully from the cave, when you master not her, but yourself, you will never again fear the games others play, because you will no longer need to play at all. You